The United States operates around 750 military bases in over 80 countries. But out of all of them, 10 stand out, not just for their size or firepower, but for how much global influence they project. Some are buried deep in mountain ranges. Others can launch strikes across continents. So which one is the most powerful US base in the world? And why does it matter? Let's count down the top 10 most powerful US military bases on Earth, and what makes each one so critical to global power. Number 10. Naval Support Facility, Diego Garcia, British Indian Ocean Territory. In the middle of the Indian Ocean, thousands of miles from the nearest major city, lies a speck of land that most people will never visit, and few even know exists. It's called Diego Garcia, an isolated atoll ringed by turquoise water and guarded by secrecy. But despite its small size and remoteness, this island plays one of the most critical roles in the global reach of American military power. Diego Garcia is often called the unsinkable aircraft carrier. That's not a metaphor, it's a strategy. During the Cold War, US planners needed a location that could project force deep into the Middle East, South Asia, and East Africa without being vulnerable to shifting political winds. They found it here, halfway between Africa and Indonesia, and transformed it into a forward base with unmatched reach. By the time the Gulf War erupted in 1991, Diego Garcia had already become a secret weapon. B-52 bombers lifted off from its long, straight runway, flying thousands of miles to strike Iraqi targets, then returned without ever needing permission from another country's airspace. The world watched on television as Baghdad lit up with explosions, but few realized the planes had launched from a tiny coral island no bigger than a small town. 10 years later, it happened again. After the 9/11 attacks, when the United States invaded Afghanistan, Diego Garcia became a launch pad for B-1 and B-2 stealth bombers. They flew nonstop over the Arabian Sea, reached Taliban targets in the mountains, dropped their payloads, and quietly returned to the island, all in a single mission. In 2003, as the Iraq War began, Diego Garcia served as a hidden nerve center once more, allowing American bombers to strike with precision while remaining far from the battlefield. But the island's value isn't just in the air. Beneath the waves, nuclear-powered submarines dock at Diego Garcia's deep-water port, quietly restocking before vanishing back into the ocean's depths. Navy vessels anchor offshore, refueled and rearmed by a pier built specifically for submarine tenders. Inside the base, massive underground fuel tanks, capable of holding over 400 million gallons of jet fuel, keep bombers and support aircraft mission ready. Nearby, warehouses overflow with pre-positioned munitions, spare parts, and emergency gear, ensuring that in the event of a major conflict, the US can wage war for weeks without waiting on shipments from home. Diego Garcia is the kind of place where military strategy and geography meet in a way few other places can match. It allows US forces to reach nearly any point in the Middle East or Asia without having to ask for access from allies or worry about being shut out of contested regions. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, this base alone gives Washington the ability to strike targets across half the globe, without warning and without dependency. Number 9. Joint Base Pearl Harbor, Hickam, Hawaii, USA. On the southern shore of Oahu, where deep blue waters meet volcanic ridgelines, lies one of the most historic and strategically important military installations in the Pacific, Joint Base Pearl Harbor, Hickam. Formed in 2010 through the merger of two storied sites, Pearl Harbor Naval Base and Hickam Air Force Base, this sprawling joint facility now serves as both a symbol of past sacrifice and a nerve center for future conflict. Pearl Harbor's name is etched into world history, immortalized by the surprise attack that thrust the United States into World War II. But more than 80 years later, its significance hasn't faded. It has evolved. Today, the base anchors America's forward military presence across the Indo-Pacific, functioning as a launch pad for everything from air superiority missions over the South China Sea to submarine patrols near North Korea. Its location is no accident. Sitting over 3,000 miles from Tokyo and over 5,000 miles from the contested waters of the South China Sea, Pearl Harbor Hickam allows the United States to strike a delicate balance, close enough to deploy force quickly into Asia, yet far enough to operate securely from sovereign U.S. territory. It's a logistical and strategic sweet spot, a midway point between mainland America and the flashpoints of the Pacific Rim. At sea, it hosts the U.S. Pacific Fleet, the largest naval command on Earth, with dozens of warships, support vessels, and nuclear-powered submarines operating from its harbors. The base's dry docks and repair yards maintain everything from Virginia-class attack submarines to guided missile destroyers. Beneath the waves, Los Angeles-class boats come and go with little fanfare, conducting surveillance, deterrence, and undersea warfare across the region. In the skies above, Hickam Field is home to squadrons of F-22 Raptors, the most advanced air superiority fighters in the U.S. arsenal, ready to deploy at a moment's notice. The airfield also hosts refueling tankers, C-17 cargo planes, and reconnaissance aircraft that make long-range missions across the Pacific possible. Overhead, a web of satellite communications, early warning radars, and missile tracking systems make the base a critical node in America's multi-domain defense architecture. As tensions rise between the United States and China, Pearl Harbor Hickam has quietly shifted from a defensive bastion to an offensive springboard. It's no longer just about preventing attacks on American soil. It's about deterring aggression, shaping the regional balance of power, and showing allies and adversaries alike that the United States still holds the high ground in the Pacific. The echoes of December 7, 1941 still reverberate here, but they are not merely relics of the past. They are reminders of what's at stake. In today's strategic contest over freedom of navigation, regional influence, and technological supremacy, Pearl Harbor Hickam is once again a frontline post, this time in the shadow war for control of the 21st century Pacific. Number 8. Camp Humphreys, South Korea. Just 40 miles south of Seoul, nestled among the rice paddies and industrial sprawl of Pyeongtaek, stands a fortress so vast and modern it resembles a small American city dropped into the Korean countryside. This is Camp Humphreys, the largest U.S. military base outside of the United States. But it's not just its size that makes it significant. It's what the base represents, a permanent frontline outpost in one of the tensest standoffs on Earth. At first glance, Camp Humphreys could pass for a sprawling college campus. There are neighborhoods with rows of family homes, American-style schools, gyms, fast food joints, even a movie theater. But behind this facade lies a war-fighting machine, engineered for rapid response and designed to deter one man just 100 miles to the north, Kim Jong-un. Home to the 8th U.S. Army and critical elements of the United Nations Command, Camp Humphreys serves as the beating heart of America's military presence on the Korean Peninsula. It supports over 20,000 U.S. troops. But when you factor in family members, contractors, and Korean support staff, that number rises above 30,000. This isn't just a base. It's a miniature society built for war readiness. The logic behind it is chillingly simple. If North Korea were to strike Seoul, Camp Humphreys is close enough to respond instantly, but far enough south to survive the opening salvo. In that dangerous balance lies its value, and that value comes at a steep price. Over $10 billion has been poured into Camp Humphreys over the last 2 decades, making it one of the most expensive military construction projects since World War II. Why would South Korea invest so heavily? Because Camp Humphreys is more than a deterrent. It's a visible, immovable reminder that if war were to break out on the peninsula, the United States would be drawn in instantly, by proximity and by design. Number 7. Ramstein Air Base, Germany. Tucked into the lush hills of southwestern Germany, surrounded by quiet villages and dense pine forests, lies a military installation that serves as the nerve center for U.S. air power across 3 continents. This is Ramstein Air Base, a name that rarely appears in headlines, yet underpins some of the most critical operations carried out by the United States in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. To the outside world, Ramstein might look like a typical airfield, but beneath its runways and radar domes lies a communications and logistics juggernaut, one that connects Washington to distant war zones with breathtaking speed and precision. It is here, in the German state of Rhineland-Palatinate, that the U.S. Air Forces Europe and Air Forces Africa are headquartered. From this single location, drones are routed over the Sahel, refueling planes launched toward Iraq, and satellite signals bounce across the globe to guide fighters, bombers, and surveillance aircraft through hostile skies. After the attacks of September 11th, Ramstein's role expanded dramatically. It became the aerial bridge between America and its battlefields, supporting everything from Bagram to Baghdad. C-17s roared into the sky, hauling tanks and supplies. Medical evacuation teams stood ready, their aircraft outfitted like flying trauma centers, waiting to bring wounded troops back from the front lines. But it's not just war logistics that make Ramstein indispensable, it's communication. Deep within the base, shielded by concrete and encrypted networks, sits a critical node in the Pentagon's global command and control system. From here, orders can be relayed to U.S. Cyber Command, NATO early warning sites, and reconnaissance aircraft orbiting over flashpoints from Ukraine to Libya. The aircraft stationed here aren't just transport tools, they're strategic lifelines. The C-130Js move quickly into narrow airstrips. The KC-135 tankers keep jets in the air for hours longer. The 86th Airlift Wing, one of the most active in the world, can respond within hours to any emergency, from earthquake relief in Turkey to weapons deliveries in Eastern Europe. In 2022, as war returned to the heart of Europe, Ramstein played a role that was both visible and invisible. It became the logistics hub for NATO's massive resupply effort to Ukraine, moving everything from medical kits to advanced missile systems. Politicians flew in for closed-door briefings. Cargo planes flew out stacked with lethal aid. But Ramstein's power isn't just military, it's geopolitical. It is the linchpin of America's promise to NATO, a forward base that allows the US to act fast without stationing troops in direct combat zones. Surveillance missions over the Black Sea, joint air patrols over the Baltics, strike readiness over North Africa, all coordinated from this single footprint in Germany. And in an age of rising tensions with Russia, the value of that footprint has only grown. Ramstein now serves as a permanent reminder. If NATO is ever tested, if borders are violated or allies are threatened, this is where the US response will likely begin. Not from Washington, not from Brussels, but from the tarmac in Ramstein. According to US Air Forces Europe and recent NATO strategic doctrine, Ramstein is no longer just a base. It's a Tier 1 asset, and that designation means any attack on it would trigger an immediate and overwhelming US response. So while the forests around it may be quiet, and the aircraft may seem to come and go like clockwork, make no mistake, Ramstein is one of the most consequential pieces of land under the American flag, a forward node in a global system built to deter, defend, and if needed, deliver force across oceans at a moment's notice. Number 6. Fort Liberty, North Carolina, USA. Hidden deep within the sprawling pine forests of North Carolina is a base unlike any other. A fortress of shadows and steel where some of the most dangerous men on Earth train for missions the world will never fully understand. This is Fort Liberty, formerly known as Fort Bragg. But make no mistake, the name may have changed, yet the mission remains the same. Deploy fast, strike hard, and disappear before the dust settles. For decades, this has been the staging ground for America's most elite warriors. Not just soldiers, but specialists, operators, men and women trained to jump from planes in the dead of night, move behind enemy lines, and make split-second decisions that can shift the balance of power. Fort Liberty is home to the U.S. Army Special Operations Command, USASOC, and the even more secretive Joint Special Operations Command, or JSOC. When a terrorist leader vanishes without a trace, or a hostage is rescued halfway across the world, chances are the call came from here. Inside this base operate three of the most feared and respected units in modern warfare: The 82nd Airborne Division stands at permanent alert. Their mission: deploy anywhere on the planet within 18 hours, fully armed, combat ready, and prepared to hold ground until reinforcements arrive. Then there's Delta Force, a name rarely spoken officially. Their operations are classified. Their targets are high value. These are the operators called upon when failure is not an option, when the US government needs to remove a threat with speed and silence. And finally, the Green Berets, trained not just to fight, but to build resistance from within. They speak local languages, they train partner forces, they conduct guerrilla warfare behind enemy lines. In many conflicts, they're the first Americans on the ground, and the last to leave. But Fort Liberty's strength isn't just in its secrecy, it's in its scale. Over 50,000 active duty personnel operate across 250 square miles of hardened infrastructure. Nearby Pope Army Airfield puts over 500 aircraft within reach. That means troops and supplies can lift off mid-crisis before the world even knows there's a crisis. In wars of the past 4 decades, from the jungles of Panama to the deserts of Afghanistan, Fort Liberty has always been in motion. Thousands of its soldiers deployed, rotated, returned, and redeployed again. Even today, its operators are embedded in conflicts we don't see, training local forces in Africa, disrupting insurgent networks in Syria, or preparing for worst-case scenarios in Eastern Europe. But this base is more than a reaction force. It's a proving ground. Inside Fort Liberty, new tactics are developed, experimental technologies are tested, allies from across the globe come to train. It's where future wars are imagined, then rehearsed. Not for conquest, but for control. Not to provoke, but to be ready the moment diplomacy breaks down. According to recent assessments, Fort Liberty is considered the tip of the spear, the sharp end of US power. It's not just a military base. It's a signal to the world that no matter how far, no matter how fast, the United States can and will act. Because when the call comes in and the mission clock starts ticking, it won't be a naval fleet or bomber squadron that answers first. It will be Fort Liberty. Number 5, Naval Base Guam, Guam, U.S. territory. Far out in the endless blue expanse of the Pacific Ocean, beyond the reach of continental defenses and nestled between Asia and the Americas, lies a volcanic island whose strategic relevance has steadily climbed with each new decade. This is Guam, an unincorporated U.S. territory that, while small in size, stands as one of the most heavily fortified and indispensable military outposts in the American defense architecture. At its core is Naval Base Guam, a critical node in Washington's pivot to Asia, and a frontline bastion in the rising contest with China. Unlike the bases in Japan or South Korea, Guam is not beholden to the politics of foreign governments. It is U.S. sovereign soil. That distinction changes everything. From this island, the United States can launch strikes, deploy submarines, and maneuver aircraft without seeking permission or navigating diplomatic red tape. It is autonomy in action, an unsinkable aircraft carrier surrounded by thousands of miles of open ocean, close enough to the South China Sea to matter, yet far enough to buy time in a crisis. Naval Base Guam itself is a joint installation, blending the immense air power of Andersen Air Force Base with the naval strength of Apra Harbor. Beneath its waters, fast attack and guided missile submarines slip out undetected, patrolling the Indo-Pacific's most sensitive fault lines. On its runways, B-1B Lancers, B-52 Stratofortresses, and B-2 Spirits prepare for long-range missions capable of reaching the Chinese mainland. Surrounding it all are hardened shelters, vast logistic stockpiles, missile defense systems like THAAD, and the support vessels of Submarine Squadron 15 and the USS Frank Cable, ensuring that Guam can project power and absorb punishment in equal measure. But Guam's power lies not just in what it holds, but in where it sits. Over 1,500 miles from the contested waters of the South China Sea, it is the closest major American military base to Taiwan that isn't subject to foreign approval or host nation limitations. That proximity, combined with its legal status, gives Guam unmatched freedom of action in a region increasingly defined by speed, surprise, and escalation. It has rightly been called the tip of the American spear career in the Pacific. The U.S. military has taken notice and acted. Over the past several years, Guam has seen billions of dollars in upgrades. New hangars and aircraft shelters are being built to withstand missile strikes. Munitions storage is expanding, and on the northern end of the island, a new Marine Corps base, Camp Blaz, is rising from the jungle. It is the first new U.S. Marine base in decades, with over 5,000 Marines expected to be stationed there by 2027. This buildup is no accident. It's part of a deliberate shift toward dispersed basing, a strategy designed to ensure that even if Guam is hit first, it will not be hit last. In testimony before Congress in April 2023, Admiral John Aquilino, commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, made the Pentagon's position clear. Guam, he said, must be defended at all costs. It was not just a policy statement, it was a warning. In the opening moments of any future conflict in the Indo-Pacific, Guam will be a target, but more importantly, it will also be a response, a launch pad, a message to adversaries that no matter how far the front line stretch, the United States has already prepared to meet them. Number 4. Al Udeid Air Base, Qatar. On the parched outskirts of Doha, hidden behind layers of concrete, razor wire, and fortified hangars, lies one of the most crucial military installations in the modern American arsenal. This is Al Udeid Air Base, an airfield in the desert that doesn't just serve the Middle East, but helps shape it. To understand Al Udeid is to understand the nerve center of U.S. air power across an entire region. It is here, in a network of underground command centers and high-security bunkers, that the United States and its allies coordinate operations from Iraq to the Persian Gulf, from Syria to the Red Sea. It is the forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command CENTCOM and home to the Combined Air and Space Operations Center, where every strike mission, drone flight, air patrol, and resupply run is plotted, executed, and tracked in real time. More than 10,000 U.S. and coalition personnel operate from this base, keeping a constant watch on one of the world's most volatile landscapes. The runways stretch over 12,000 feet, long enough to launch the largest aircraft in the American inventory. Fully loaded C-5 Galaxy transports, B-52 bombers, and tankers that keep fighters in the air for hours on end. Its hardened shelters and fuel farms are designed to sustain combat operations without pause, while munitions depots and intelligence centers work around the clock to ensure that no sortie flies blind. But Al Udeid is more than infrastructure. It's an alliance made concrete. Originally constructed in the 1990s and expanded after September 11th, the base has grown into a behemoth, largely financed by the Qatari government. Over $8 billion has been poured into its development, not just to host the Americans, but to anchor them in place. For Qatar, a small nation in a turbulent region, the base is a shield. For the United States, it is a launch pad. That partnership was recognized at the highest levels when, in 2021, President Biden formally designated Qatar a major non-NATO ally, a rare status that solidified its strategic role in U.S. foreign policy. While the politics of the Middle East shift and realign, Al Udeid stands firm, a desert citadel of steel and satellite feeds, tracking threats and launching missions in defense of a fragile regional balance. In times of crisis, the eyes of American commanders often turn first to this base, not because it is the largest, though it is, but because it is trusted, proven, and built to endure. Al Udeid does not draw headlines, but without it, modern American air power in the Middle East would be blind, deaf, and grounded. Number 3. Naval Base Kitsap, Washington, USA. Tucked beneath the gray mist and towering evergreens of Washington state lies a base that rarely makes headlines, yet silently holds the keys to humanity's most destructive power. This is Naval Base Kitsap, perched along the quiet inlets of the Puget Sound. It is here, far from the chaos of Washington, D.C., or the intensity of forward-deployed theaters, that the United States anchors the deadliest leg of its nuclear arsenal. Naval Base Kitsap is more than a naval installation. It is the beating heart of America's sea-based nuclear deterrent. Home to 8 of the nation's 14 active Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines, it houses a fleet that lives in shadows. These vessels, known as SSBNs, slip beneath the waves for months at a time, undetected and unstoppable. Armed with Trident II D5 missiles, each capable of carrying multiple independently targeted nuclear warheads, they represent the most survivable element of the U.S. nuclear triad. When one speaks of a second strike capability, it is these submarines silently patrolling the depths that give that doctrine life. But the power of Kitsap does not end at sea. According to defense analysts and nuclear watchdogs, the base is believed to store more than 1,300 nuclear warheads, more than any other site in the United States. Much of that arsenal is housed within the Strategic Weapons Facility, Pacific, or SWFPAC, a highly secure complex where warheads are maintained, tested, and loaded with precision and secrecy. The base also encompasses the Bremerton Naval Shipyard, a critical facility where these submarines are overhauled and modernized, ensuring the fleet's readiness in an age of rapid technological evolution. Security at Kitsap is absolute. Beyond the layers of physical barriers and electronic surveillance, specialized security teams and advanced underwater detection systems form an invisible wall around the weapons of last resort. Few places on Earth are guarded more tightly, not only because of what is stored there, but because of what it represents. The role of Kitsap is not to fight, but to deter. At any given moment, at least one Ohio-class submarine from this base is somewhere beneath the Pacific, silently cruising at depth, beyond the reach of satellites or sonar. That silent presence, undetectable and always ready, assures adversaries that any first strike would be met with an overwhelming second. Naval Base Kitsap does not boast. It does not project force in the conventional sense. Instead, it holds a quiet, almost ghostly power, one that rests not in the threat of war, but in its prevention. In the grim calculus of global deterrence, Kitsap is the insurance policy too dangerous to ignore and too vital to ever let slip from view. Number 2. Cheyenne Mountain Complex, Colorado, USA. Beneath 2,000 feet of solid granite hidden deep within the rugged spine of the Rocky Mountains lies a fortress unlike any other in the United States. This is not a launching pad or a forward base. It is a redoubt, a last line of defense built not to strike, but to survive. This is the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, a Cold War-era bunker that still watches the skies in silence. Originally constructed in the 1960s at the height of nuclear brinkmanship, Cheyenne Mountain was designed to withstand the unthinkable. Its mission was simple, yet absolute. If America were ever under attack, this mountain would become the nation's brainstem. Today, even in an age of cyber warfare and space-based threats, that mission continues. At the heart of the mountain sits the nerve center of North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, and key elements of U.S. Space Command. Here, behind 25-ton blast doors, teams of operators sit in reinforced control rooms, scanning a global mosaic of radars, satellites, and surveillance feeds. They track more than 15,000 aircraft a day, monitor space debris and foreign satellites, and maintain round-the-clock vigilance for signs of incoming missiles. If a nuclear launch were detected, this is where the alarm would ring first. But Cheyenne Mountain is more than just a data center. It is a self-contained citadel hardened against the full spectrum of modern warfare. Shielded from electromagnetic pulses and capable of surviving direct nuclear impact, the facility includes its own power plant, underground water reservoirs, air filtration systems, and dormitories stocked with supplies to sustain over 1,000 personnel for more than a month in complete isolation. In the event of a national catastrophe, cyber, kinetic, or nuclear, the mountain could still function as the United States' last operational command post. Though much of NORAD's daily activity has shifted to the nearby Peterson Space Force Base, Cheyenne Mountain remains in a state of warm standby, ready to go fully active at a moment's notice. It is regularly used for drills simulating high-level continuity of government scenarios, ensuring that even if the nation's most vulnerable systems were crippled, this mountain would endure. Cheyenne Mountain doesn't cast a shadow across the globe like a fleet or a bomber wing. Instead, it stands as a monument to preparation, a place built not for war, but for what might follow. In a world growing ever more unpredictable, it is the unblinking eye and unyielding heart of a nation determined never to be caught off guard. Number 1. The Pentagon, Virginia, USA. If a nuclear war ever breaks out, if submarines dive, missiles launch, and satellites fall silent, it won't begin in a bunker or on a distant battlefield. It will begin with a phone call inside a 5-sided building just across the Potomac River. And once that call is made, the world changes forever. This is the Pentagon. At first glance, it might look like just another government complex. Massive, gray, sprawling. But the Pentagon is not just a building. It is the central nervous system of the most powerful military machine in human history. Every order, every operation, every secret flows through its corridors. This is the command hub for the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Space Force, and Coast Guard in wartime. It is where strategy becomes action, where intelligence becomes targets, and where diplomacy often ends when deterrence fails. Completed in 1943 during the height of World War II, the Pentagon was born out of urgency, built in just 16 months to coordinate a global war. Today, it remains the largest office building on Earth, with more floor space than the Empire State Building. Inside, over 23,000 military and civilian personnel work in synchronized motion, directing the movements of nearly 1.3 million active duty service members and over 800,000 reservists across 6 continents. Its influence is global. From its core, the Pentagon coordinates everything from special operations in Africa to cyber defenses against foreign hacks, from the logistics of aircraft carrier groups in the Pacific to nuclear readiness in Europe. The National Military Command Center, a windowless vault buried deep inside, serves as the crisis communications hub for the President and Joint Chiefs. In times of national emergency, this room is the heartbeat of command and control. But the Pentagon is more than infrastructure. It is symbol and target alike. On September 11, 2001, when a hijacked plane slammed into its western wall, killing 125 people, the world saw that symbolism in blood and fire. Since then, it has been fortified, not just with steel and concrete, but with encrypted networks, classified communications infrastructure, and hardened protocols for what insiders grimly call continuity of government. This includes the shadowy doomsday systems designed to maintain nuclear command and control if Washington were ever wiped out. What makes the Pentagon truly powerful, though, is not what it contains, but what it controls. It doesn't launch missiles. It directs them. It doesn't patrol oceans. It sends fleets. It doesn't drop bombs. It signs the orders. In essence, the Pentagon is the chessboard on which America moves every piece in its global military game. So why do these bases matter? These aren't just coordinates on a map or clusters of barracks in far-off lands. They are the physical embodiment of American military power, projecting influence, securing interests, and, often quietly, shaping world events. Some of these bases exist to deter, others to strike, still others to supply and support. But together they form a global latticework that touches every ocean, every continent, and even outer space. Yet these installations do more than just prepare for war. They also enable humanitarian aid drops over war-torn regions, disaster relief after earthquakes and tsunamis, and medical outreach missions in places most Americans will never see. From drone bases in the Horn of Africa to airlift operations in the Indo-Pacific, American bases often stand between chaos and coordination. As the world faces rising authoritarianism, cyber threats, and even a renewed space race, these bases will either evolve or be outflanked. The future may not be about more bases, but smarter ones, hardened, dispersed, and capable of defending not just borders, but bites and satellites. So, which of these surprised you most? And as geopolitics shift and budgets tighten, will the US double down on this global presence, or slowly retreat behind its own shores? History tells us one thing: when great powers pull back, others step in.